Hey vinyl friends and vinyl community, it's Brian from Brian's Vinyl Records, and I am here again with another episode of Artist Spotlight. And this time I picked a real fun one. This is a great band that I really got into after I got into the lead singer first. So I'm talking about Black Sabbath this week. So stay tuned, stick around, I'll show you which albums I have in my collection from Black Sabbath. Alright, welcome back. So as I said at the intro, I didn't get into Black Sabbath right away. I had heard, obviously, some of the Black Sabbath songs. Everyone, I think, has heard Iron Man and probably Paranoid in their lifetimes. But I wasn't really a fan of Black Sabbath until I became a really big fan of Ozzy Osbourne. And once I became a fan of Ozzy Osbourne, which really started with the No More Tears album, and then I went back to the first album, Blizzard of Oz, from Ozzy, and kind of worked my way, filling it in here and there with different eras of Ozzy Osbourne. But the video released during the time of No More Tears, which I believe was called Live and Loud, really kind of got me to know that Ozzy Osbourne was the lead singer of Black Sabbath. So I was late to the party there. But of course, when I was younger, I would go to my grandma's house, and in my grandma's basement was my uncle's record collection, and he had a lot of Black Sabbath albums, a lot of Ozzy Osbourne Black Sabbath albums. Probably a vast majority of Ozzy's albums with Black Sabbath were in that collection, and I would borrow them from time to time and listen to them, and I really got involved in Black Sabbath. Well, then, of course, when Dehumanizer came out, the Dio album, I fell in love with the song Time Machine, which was featured in the Wayne's World movie, and became a fan of the Dio era. So then, of course, I bought the Heaven and Hell album, which was the big one with Dio, and got in there. And then later in life, I got into the Tony Martin era. And that was just by happenstance. This was in the days of the Napsters and stuff, and in college, people had copies of all these different albums that I'd never heard of before. And so I got a hold of some of the Tony Martin era stuff and really enjoyed it. And so I started buying those CDs when I found them, which, believe me, not always as easy to get. Nowadays, much easier, but back then, not a lot of Tony Martin era Black Sabbath was easily found in your record stores or your CD stores. So I really have spanned the life of Black Sabbath and really become a big fan of the group and pretty much all of its eras altogether. I don't have everything that they've released, obviously. There's a lot of the Tony Martin era that's really hard to get on vinyl if you don't want to pay a ton. And then also, I'm missing a few in between the Ozzy and Dio eras and kind of in that era. So let's get into what I do have, because I have quite a bit and I'm really happy about these. So we'll obviously start where it all begins, with the original Black Sabbath album. Fantastic debut album from Black Sabbath. This was released in 1970. This version here is a 2016 remaster reissue pressing that came on 180 gram vinyl. It sounds absolutely fantastic. I love listening to this album, and it's really fun. I like this one because it is a full gatefold Black Sabbath, which I don't believe the original pressings are gatefolds. But this is a really great album. I love listening to it, and it's just classic Black Sabbath. The next one is the second album that they put out, and this is the one that most people know. This is Paranoid, which contains, of course, the hit songs Paranoid and Iron Man. And this one is really cool because this is also a 2016 remaster reissue pressing, but this is the deluxe edition, which comes with some cool extras here at the end here. So there's instrumental versions of War Pigs, alternate lyric versions of Paranoid, alternate lyric versions of Planet Caravan, instrumental version of Iron Man, instrumental Electric Funeral, Hand of Doom, an alternate mix of Rat Salad, and an instrumental version of Fairies Wear Boots. So kind of a really cool feature to come with this album was this a deluxe edition, and I didn't pay a ton for it, which I'm really happy about. and I just think it sounds really awesome. So while it's not an original press, I really dig the reissues that Black Sabbath has been getting put out. And this is again a 2016. This next one here is pretty cool. This is one I got on an online auction that someone was given out for pretty cheap, actually, for what it is. This is Black Sabbath Volume 4. This one came out in 1972. So obviously, you know, Volume 4 would mean it's the fourth one they released, so I'm missing one that came before this. But that being said, this is Volume 4, and this is a French pressing from 1976. So it's a reissue French pressing from 1976. It is a gatefold, so pretty cool little gatefold there. The reason that this one came at me so cheap is because it had this whole section up here was split, and all I really had to do was put some glue down on the seam there, and it seemed to have fixed my problem. But that was split, and so they discounted it quite a bit, and I was very happy to get this this French pressing of Volume 4. This one, let's see, this one contains the songs Wheels of Confusion, Tomorrow's Dream, Snowblind, Luana Surprise is a fun instrumental piece. Just a really good album all around. But Black Sabbath Volume 4, 1976 French pressing of the 1972 album. The next one we have is Sabbath Bloody Sabbath. This one is fantastic. A great album. The title track is one of my favorite Sabbath tunes. This was released in 1973, and again, this is a 2016 repress and remaster of the album. A nice gatefold. I got this one on Amazon Warehouse, and the reason is because there's a nice scratch that goes across the cover here. So I got it at a really good discounted price. I think I paid less than $10 for this. Really good deal on an album like this, especially considering that Sabbath Bloody Sabbath obviously is the big song on here. I think Sabracadabra got a little play as well. Just a fun album, great album. My uncle had this one. I remember borrowing it quite a bit when I was younger. So cool album to have here. This next one I borrowed from my uncle a lot because for me this is probably my favorite of the Black Sabbath Ozzy era, the first Ozzy era I should say. Why? I don't know. I just really dig the songs on here. Am I Going Insane is a song I absolutely love on here. Hole in the Sky is really good. Symptom of the Universe is really good. I just, for some reason, I always gravitated to this album and really enjoyed it. The real fun cover, the story behind that's really fun as well if you haven't heard it. Basically, you have Bill Ward here and Ozzy dressed kind of funny. Bill Ward's got these really funny red tights, and Ozzy's got this Japanese robe on. And the funny thing is they were pretty spaced out on some, hallucination drugs at the time. They forgot about the photo shoot, so they didn't have any of their clothes. So they kind of looked around to see what was available at that beck and call at the photo shoot, and that's what they came up with. So that's the reason why, Ozzy's got these cowboy boots here and this Japanese robe and no shoes on Bill Ward and these red tights, just funky looking outfits. So that's what that's all about. Kind of a funny story there. But great album. Another one that is a gatefold. And this one is also a 2016 remaster repress. Up next, I have the 1976 album, Technical Ecstasy. This is one that you don't hear a whole lot about in the Sabbath verse. Not a lot of hits came off of this one, but if you take a listen to this is actually a really good album, a real fun album to listen to. So I was happy to pick this up again. Got this one fairly good pricing. Another gatefold. This one is a 2016 repress reissue as well. Sounds great. They did a really good job with these reissues, making them sound absolutely fantastic. Okay, this next one is one that I have, and obviously you can tell I am missing the cover on this one. And this is one that it did belong to my uncle, and I'm not sure why I have it or how it became part of my possession, but this is Black Sabbath's Greatest Hits. This is a compilation from 1977, and it was released in the Netherlands. So it's a Netherlands pressing on the NEMS label, which was pretty cool. And for some reason, I had the album. It's not in the greatest of shape in the world. In fact, it could use a very good cleaning and see if I can spread some life on this, but it wasn't stored very well. And unfortunately, the cover is missing. So I've always been on the lookout for someone who had an extra cover of Black Sabbath's greatest hits so that I could buy that from them and put a cover on this finally. But so far, I've had zero luck in locating that, or even just finding one where the vinyl is in really crappy condition, but the cover's okay. I've been looking for that too, and unfortunately, no luck yet, but still on the hunt. So if you have a really beat up version of this album, or even just the cover of this album, I would be more than happy to take that off your hands. And we get to the end of the first Ozzy Osbourne era with this 1978 album, Never Say Die. Again, one that doesn't get a whole lot of love in the Black Sabbath universe, but is still a pretty solid album. And I'm not sure that anything really got played much. Ozzy at this point was really checked out of the band, and they just kind of put this together. And I like it. I think it's great. This is a 2013 Rhino reissue of this album, and it's not a gatefold, just a standard sleeve, but again, in really good shape, looks great, sounds great. So Ozzy is no longer in the band. They find a new singer in Ronnie James Dio, metal master, and they put out an absolute masterpiece, Heaven and Hell. And this is an absolutely fantastic album. This is 1980, and this is a 1980 pressing of it. And man, this album is so good. And unfortunately for Black Sabbath, Ozzy Osbourne put out Blizzard of Oz and kind of overshadowed this album at the time, which is really sad because it's an absolutely fantastic record. Dio is amazing on here, and it has classic Heaven and Hell, obviously the title song, Neon Nights, Children of the Sea, Die Young. I mean, just top to bottom, one of the top metal albums of all time, Heaven and Hell. That was then followed up with Dio again, and this is Mob Rules, released in 1981. And this is a 1981 pressing. This thing is in just absolutely outstanding shape for being a 1981 pressing of the album. Super excited when I found this. I think I paid $10 to buy this album. So way good deal on this album, especially being a 1980 pressing. And really good album. I think right up there with Heaven and Hell on the Dio stage. Doesn't get as much love as Heaven and Hell, but still a classic Dio Sabbath album. Next is the album that kind of broke up the Dio Sabbath era, and that is Live Evil. Live album that they put together, and this is an absolutely fantastic cover. If you ever get a chance to just look over this cover, because the imagery on here is fantastic. They have all sorts of different references to different album titles in this cover, and it's just really awesome. So this is Live Evil, and the story is that when this was being mixed for the album, you would have Dio come in for a couple hours, and he would start mixing with the engineer, telling him to turn up this or turn up that, blah blah blah. And then at night, Geezer and Iommi would come in, and they would change the mix completely again, and they would go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth on this mix, and to the point where everyone was just pissed off at each other because they couldn't get a good mix. I will say this, I think it sounds fantastic in the final product. I don't know whose mix it is or if they compromised or any of that, but whatever was done at the end, I think this is a really good sounding live album and really captures how awesome Dio is in concert. So Live Evil was 1982. So Dio is now out of the band, so we're on singer number 3 here, and that is going to be Ian Gillan, whose fame is with Deep Purple, and he joined the band for one album, and that is this one, Born Again Black Sabbath. Now, this is 1983, and this is a 1983 pressing of the album that I found at one of my local stores. Couldn't pass it up. And you know, when I first got this album, I bought it on CD, and I couldn't get myself to listen to it because I thought it sounded really poorly. I thought the production was really bad on it, and it just didn't sound good. So I hesitated for a long time to buy this on vinyl too, just because I didn't really listen to it much and didn't enjoy it as much. But I did pick it up because I wanted to have the album, because it's a Sabbath album, and so I figured I should have it in my collection because I've been collecting all the Sabbath stuff I can. And when I put it on the record player and did give it a listen, I was blown away at how much better this album sounded on vinyl. So it's almost like when they did the transfer to CD, because this was 1983, so CDs were brand spanking new. They weren't releasing them yet on CD. So when they did the transfer to CD, it sounds like they just didn't mix it properly for the CD when they put it out, because it doesn't sound good. But this album on vinyl was mixed very well and sounds absolutely fantastic. And I've actually started to really enjoy this album. So I like spinning this. I like listening to the songs, and I think it's a highly underrated album for Black Sabbath. And I wouldn't hesitate to give a vinyl version a listen because I think it sounds great. So Ian Gillan is gone. They bring in another guy. Tony Iommi does a solo project, and the record company forces them to use his name. I believe he did that with Glenn Hughes, and then Glenn Hughes is out because he wasn't in it for Black Sabbath. He was there to be with Tony Iommi's solo project. I unfortunately do not have the Seventh Sons solo album. I'm still looking to get a copy of that. I've seen it a couple times in the wild, but the prices that were being asked were a little more than I thought it was worth, so I'm still on the hunt for that. But then they bring in a guy named Ray Gillan, and he's there for about a half a minute to write an album and record, and then suddenly he's out of the band, and they're sitting there with an album almost fully recorded and no lead singer. So they call on an unknown name in Tony Martin. He comes in, retracks all the vocals for this album, and puts out this great album. It's called The Eternal Idol. This is the only, sadly, Tony Martin era album that I have in my collection. He has, I believe, 3 more albums to his name with the Black Sabbath, and they're all absolutely fantastic, with the exception of Forgiven, which is not one of my favorites, but still not terrible. But this is a really good album. The Shining is the song on here that really is what people know from that era, if they know anything, and it's an absolutely fantastic song, but everything on here is really good. The album sounds great. This is 1987, and this is a 1987 club pressing, and just really love this album. I want so bad to get more Tony Martin era Black Sabbath albums on vinyl, but the pricing is just unbelievable, so I'm stuck with just this one for now. And the last album I have, unfortunately for me, because I really want some more albums that are in between that album and this one, but I just can't afford them, and that is the final album from Black Sabbath called 13. And this is a 2013 album release, and the 2013 pressing of the album is a gatefold, and it is absolutely beautiful. It sounds amazing on black wax, of course, and I love this album. I think it's a final statement. This is perfect for them. It sounds great. It's classic Black Sabbath sound with Ozzy Osbourne back on vocals, and I was fortunate enough for me to go and see this final tour, the end tour, with Black Sabbath and Ozzy Osbourne, and it was just a blast. Really good stuff. Sadly, Bill Ward did not participate in the making of this album, which is unfortunate, but they did a great job with this, and I really enjoy this album. So 13, the final album from Black Sabbath, really good stuff. So there you have it. That is my Black Sabbath collection. There are plenty of holes that I want to fill in the collection that I'm still looking for, obviously. The Tony Martin era stuff, I've heard rumblings that they may see some reissues of the Tony Martin era stuff, which I think would be absolutely fantastic. I'm hoping that is the case. I know there's all sorts of legal battles going on with Sharon and Ozzy and then Black Sabbath and Tony Iommi over the name and everything else. I know that Dio had to change the name of Black Sabbath to Heaven and Hell and put out the final album that they did together, which, by the way, I have and is absolutely fantastic album. So if you want to listen to a great Dio final album, Heaven and Hell's album that they put out with him is absolutely fantastic. So, but until I can fill those in, that's what I have. I love my Black Sabbath. So I hope you enjoyed this video and a look into my Black Sabbath collection. Again, if you did, please give it a thumbs up. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button down below and leave a comment or question. I love to hear from you guys. I love interacting with everybody. I thank you for watching, and until next time, keep spinning, vinyl friends.